Made it too dark. Boom, 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 boom. Hey y'all, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Morgan, and here we do a little bit of all things creepy. And today I am very excited because we are reading scary stories that you guys have sent in to me, but they're all from the Appalachian Mountains. And if you don't know me, I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains. I still live here. I've always lived here, and it is a terrifying place. And I always feel so validated whenever I get Appalachia stories because I'm like, okay, it's not just me. But please check out the description below to send in your scary stories, whether they be from whether they're from the Appalachian Mountains or anywhere else in the world. You will also find my other social media links and podcast episodes to mine and my husband's podcast. And with that being said, let's get into these stories. Because it is 1:30 in the morning, I am in the Appalachian Mountains, and I can't think of a worse decision to make than me reading these stories right now. So I've encountered this thing, and I feel it's connected to my family. Before this story even begins, you are going to need some context. I live in a small town in North Carolina at the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. I live in the woods, so it's normal to hear and see things. A little bit about me. I'm in my mid-teens, and I've seen paranormal things since I was younger. I'm religious. Here's a few stories. My mom has seen a demon on 3 occasions, my dad's seen a ghost house, and my parents have seen a walker. Now here's the main story. I was home alone and it was really cold out. It's the winter, so the sun sets early. I go to let my dogs out and my head was drawn to the side. That's when I see this thing. Since doing some research, it seems like a windy boy. But wait, there's more. My motion sensor cameras picked up on movement a year later. There was orbs like eyes, but way too tall. Later I went back to find it, but it was magically gone. I need some advice on how to get rid of this thing. So, when it comes to the windy boy, you really don't get rid of them. If that's the only experience you had, I wouldn't think too much into it, because if you didn't catch its attention, it's not going to stay around and waste its time. But if you're still having experiences, let me know, because that's a whole different conversation. But if you see something, no you didn't. If you hear something, no you didn't. Just try to ignore it as much as you can. Alright, next story. I've had maybe the scariest paranormal experience of my life. I've always been very empathetic. One of my land family members visited me in my dreams, and I've also been able to feel the energy in a place. While living in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, I'm not new to the whole scary thing. I once took my dog out and saw a black figure standing at the end of my road. It started to come towards me, and I calmly went back inside my house. Another time, I went to take my dog out. Little context, I live by a wheat field. I could hear laughter coming from that field, and my dog froze staring at something. I called him calmly, and we went back in. I also know something is around my town. My local library is once a dance club, and a man was shot in there by a jealous man. He goes by the name Johnny. I've always felt him being a good spirit, and he often gives me book recommendations by pushing them off the shelf. My school's also very creepy. Girls don't go in the bathroom alone. If you're not paying attention to some teachers in a classroom, you can see this figure out of the corner of your eye. It goes away when you pay attention, though. The paranormal thing is not new to me, but I've just had a whole world go quiet. There were no cars, crickets, or anything. I felt something was behind me, and I calmly walked to my home. Before I was going inside, I saw a black figure. I'm no longer going out, and I already salted my house and blessed it. I mean, that's good. Cleansing and doing all that is good. The best thing to do, kind of like I said with the other one, is to pretend that you didn't hear or see anything. Yeah, Appalachia's something, man. Black salt's really good, though. If you cleanse your space and then you put black salt on your windowsills and door frames, that helps a lot. Just remember to not salt ring your house, even though that sounds like a really good idea, because it damages the soil and can harm it. So don't do that. Alright, next story. After seeing some of your most recent follower stories and personal experiences, I thought it couldn't hurt to throw my story out into the world. Though the only reason I feel alright about writing this down is because I'm away at college and will not be home until spring. Let's get into it, I guess. I'm not totally sure how these story submissions work. I had my first paranormal experience when I was around 3 years old, and it's honestly my first clear memory. It was pretty tame as far as haunted stories go, but I saw this figure of an old woman in the basement of our 200-year-old farmhouse. Years later, my dad texted me a photo of a picture that was nailed to a stud in our crawlspace attic, and it looked almost exactly like that woman. Weird. Stuff like that has always happened in my life, and even my best friend from high school claims that I attach things to her, since she never had any super scary experiences until she met me. Usually it would be things like tapping and scratching at my walls, a little girl at the end of my bed, footsteps coming down the stairs, or classical music playing from an unknown source. What makes these all worse, in my opinion, is that most of them were also experienced by other people, so I can't just tell myself that I'm making things up. Well, the worst of it starts my senior year of high school, when things started becoming clearer and the activity picked up in a startling way. I would hear voices and see figures in the road while in my car. I would point out odd occurrences when riding with my friends, and they would pretend that they did not see anything until we got back home. I know I shouldn't point these things out or pay them much attention, but there's always something in me that desperately wants to know that I'm not crazy. Later that year, in the summer, I was at a friend's graduation party, and we were staying the night at her new house that was not fully renovated. We decided that it would be fun to go explore the woods behind her house at night. I was all for it because I love spending time in nature with my friends. Unfortunately, as soon as I stepped outside, I got a terrible feeling. Then as I walked to the tree line, I stopped for a moment and showed my flashlight into the trees. Well, there was a pair of eyes looking back at me. They're not visible from any other direction. I moved my flashlight an inch in any direction, and they're not visible. While that did freak me out a bit, I figured that it was just a deer, even though I still had this terrible feeling. I showed a few of my friends, and they crashed around the tree line and tried to scare it away. It did not run like I expected it to, and the eyes got taller and closer, moving in a way that I'm still freaked out by. It looked like they were gliding, as even though it got closer, the eyes did not move or go up and down at all like a deer's usually would. Absolutely freaked out, my best friend and I went back inside, making the rest of the girls come with us. After a while, things got worse, even in the house, and the door to the basement where we were staying ended up swinging open, and stuff would fly from the walls. Me and two of my friends left immediately, so freaked out that we had to stay on the phone with each other until we made it home safely. I wish that was where it ended, but apparently as soon as my group left, things immediately calmed down. Nothing else happened that night. A few months later, I was home for fall break at college and had headed back to the local Walmart to pick up some yarn for a crochet project. On the way back, I began to get that feeling that I usually get when I know that there's going to be something in the road ahead. I'm sure anyone who's lived in a really rural area will know what I'm talking about, especially with deer. So I come over a small hill, and I'm already slowing down, and I see a tall figure in the road in front of me, with eyes that I would have to guess were 7 to 8 feet in the air. It turned, looked at me, and then, just like what I had seen at my friend's house, glided out of the road in a way that I still cannot comprehend. It was tall, gaunt, and had a head like a deer. At this point, I'm in shock and still inching towards in the car. That's when I see what it had been dragging. A deer spine, still dripping blood, was laying in the road where this thing had been. I floored it. By the time I got home, I was almost in hysterics. Like the stupid white people we are, my dad and I went back about 10 minutes later because I desperately wanted to see a bear or something in that field to disprove what I saw. There was nothing. No creature, no spine, not even the blood that I had seen smeared on the road. There was only a rotting deer carcass about 100 feet off the road from where I had seen it, missing a spine, looking way too old to have produced enough blood to explain what I had seen. I was extremely freaked out, and had not been able to drive comfortably at night ever since. It always feels like I'm being watched. Anyways, any tips on how to get rid of this thing would be super helpful, but I also thought it was eerily in line with some of the other things that I've been posting lately. For context of this whole word dump, I live in rural northern Appalachia, in a region with more hills than mountains, but it's still pretty eerie. I hope you're doing well. I was until I read that story in Appalachia at precisely 1:30 in the morning. It's my fault. So when it comes to them, the best thing you can do to ward them off is iron. I would recommend keeping that either outside your property or right inside of your door. Literally any kind of iron you can find helps. Black salt helps a lot. But the number one thing to remember is you didn't see anything, you didn't hear anything. Just try your best to ignore it. I know you said you like acknowledging it because you like confirmation that you're not losing your mind. You know you're not. You've had too many experiences with other people. So just try your best to ignore it. Unfortunately, I don't know if these things ever leave you alone. I know the one that I ran from hasn't, and it's been years. So keep your sanity. Pretend you don't hear or see it. Alright, next story. I just watched a video you posted about a follower in Pennsylvania, and it sounded so similar to an experience that I had as a kid. I lived in an old coal mining town in the Appalachian Mountains, and our house was built in probably the 40s or 50s. It had an extremely creepy unfinished basement. Think of the basement out of The Conjuring, but smaller. When I was around 5 to 6, both of my parents were at work, and my grandmother was at my house babysitting. I was standing in my kitchen close to where the door to go downstairs to the basement was. I hear my dad, who was 20 minutes away at his job, call my name from the basement. It said, "Hey Liv, can you come down here for a minute?" I went to tell my grandmother that my dad was home from work and he was downstairs. I don't remember much about what she said, but I do remember she told me that he was not home and wouldn't let me go back into the kitchen by myself. There was a lot of unexplainable events that happened while I lived in that house, but eventually I learned to ignore it and not ask questions. Did you say something just now? Did you hear that?
No.
Ew. Ew. Okay. Next story. I used to live in the somewhat valley area in the Appalachian Mountains, and I've been a fan for a while, and I don't mind if you share these stories, but they're experiences from when I lived in the Appalachian Mountains and others. When I was 3 years old, my dad's stepmom and me moved into a little house in the mountains, and we had a few neighbors, and there was a cow pasture a few feet from our back door that separated us from the forest line. My dad is a heavy Christian, which is why I never heard about any folklore about the area, because he didn't believe in it, and he didn't want to believe in it. I've heard people talk about how you want to keep your windows covered at night in Appalachia, but since my parents never believed, they never covered any windows or got me curtains. My room is separated from theirs by the dining room and the living room, so whenever I called out to them when I had nightmares, I've struggled with nightmares for years and have them almost nightly when we lived there. Since my room didn't have a door, I could always see out into the dining room and kitchen at night. One night I wake up in the middle of the night to what I thought was my dad because he was a light sleeper and would wake up and come into my room or walk around. So when I heard the noises in the kitchen, I didn't think much of it until I looked into the kitchen and saw a really tall male figure, which was strange because my dad's a bit shorter than average. Its back was towards me, and as a dumb kid who used to trust anyone who would walk away with men dressed like my dad, I called out, "Hello," and this thing slowly turns around. When it was facing towards me, I saw what its face was, and it was completely black except for a pair of sunken eyes that looked wide and terrifying. It started to lurch over, the tips of its fingers nearly touching my door. I remember feeling like I was going to vomit and feeling lightheaded as I started sobbing. I covered my face with my hands and started calling for my dad. My dad quickly came into the room and asked if I wanted to talk about my nightmare like he did every time. I stuttered and shook my head no. He spent a few minutes calming me down before staying with me. I looked back into the kitchen and it wasn't there anymore. Another story I have about a family friend who lived in the mountains. He's someone off the grid and didn't have many things that you would see in a house closer to the city. I didn't go to his house much, but every time I did, it seemed so cool to me. The air felt so calm around the house, which feels rare to say about the mountains. However, there was this time that makes my stomach turn just thinking about it. My dad's stepmom and I visited him, and after spending a bit of time being mesmerized by his house, my stepmom called me outside to look at some deer that were in the distance. I go outside, and the calm feeling about the place is gone. It feels heavy and unnatural because of the soothing feeling of how it should feel there. It was quiet. I look at the deer and everything seems pretty normal until I notice that one is looking straight at us. Slowly, one by one, they all raise their heads and look at us. I felt as if I had put on a cold shirt. The entire feeling wasn't right. I almost felt stuck until my dad called me and my stepmom to the car and said goodbye to the friend. When I went and hugged my friend bye, it just felt normal again. The warmth of that place returned, and it felt like he brought the safety in place. I know I've already said a lot, but I have at least one more story that doesn't take place in these mountains. This story happened at my mom's house, and for context, I had many nightmares about this house. I was scared of my mom's room in the attic, but what scared me the most was the windows. We had big windows in the living room and dining room, and in my childhood bedroom, there was this window that was far up from the ground because we lived on a hill. I had a really bad paranoia as a child and would see things in the windows that at one point I started ignoring, and over time I developed a fear of windows in general. But back to the window in my bedroom. It's high off the ground because of the fact that our house is on a hill. One time I would stay up late at night and fall asleep with my lights on. The moon was full and bright and the curtains were sheer, so I had my light off and I let the moonlight light up my room. It was getting closer to the early morning and I could hear a tap on my window. I think it's just something from a tree because we're surrounded by the forest, but the tapping happens again. I do something that I usually wouldn't do, and I look up at the window. In the window I see a pair of eyes and a hand. After that experience at my dad's house, I calmed myself down and closed my eyes, hoping it would go away. I cover my eyes with my arm and curl up under the blanket. The tapping still happens, but I ignore it, and over time of forcing myself to stay completely still and keeping my eyes closed, I fall asleep. In the morning, I say nothing. I was too scared to talk about it and thought if I did, it would come back. The Appalachian Mountains are certainly a very creepy place. I've shared so many personal stories about living here, folklore-based and not folklore-based, but it's wild here. But anyways, that is all for today. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you tomorrow.